Hey 242, last weekend if you were in church, you heard the campus pastors tell you about November 4th and 5th, a weekend where we're going to do something called the Big Give. I wanted to come and tell you a little bit about how that came to be and where that idea came from. You know, in 2008, the economy in the state of Michigan, hit a speed bump? It crashed. And over the course of that year, churches around us began to lay people off of their staff. And I was at the point where I was seriously looking around the office and starting to think that same way. Do I lay off staff? Maybe a desperate letter to all our small groups begging them to give more money. But then I was convicted. And time again, we'd preached from our stage the truth of God's word, that you reap what you sow, that you can't outgive God. And so we prayed as a staff and we decided to do our very first Big Give. We set a goal to give away an entire offering of $50,472.32. And you have to understand that was a huge goal for us. Up to that point, the average weekend giving was like $16,000. But the reason we felt called to that specific amount was because at that time, if everyone in our church had tithed, we figured that was the weekly offering. That's what it could have been, $50,000, some odd dollars. And the heart behind giving this money away was to encourage people to take a next step in generosity and see the potential our church had to do good in our community. Just like this Big Give, we had 3 missions back then: money to help the poorest of the poor in a third world country, plant new churches in the U.S., and then try and meet specific needs in our own community. Well, you could feel people getting excited back then. Then the week before we were to take up this offering and give it all away, General Motors announced bankruptcy. Fear went through the community. We were tempted to pull back, but we knew God was calling us to push forward anyway, and so that's what we did. And I'll never forget the day that weekend came, and we took up the offering right at the beginning of our services at both campuses, and then we had our teams count them as the service was going on. And I was so nervous that we wouldn't hit our goal. I was preaching, and my phone vibrated in my pocket, and the total was in. And we didn't give $50,000 away in one weekend. We gave $96,000. People went nuts. The whole church was cheering about the offering. It was awesome. And as we're going into this Big Give now on November 4th and 5th, the reason we're doing this isn't because 242 can afford to lose a weekend's offering. It's not like we have stacks of cash just sitting around, believe me. We're doing this first to do the most good that we've ever done in our community, but maybe even more importantly, to encourage you to take your next step in generosity. So many new people have called 242 their church home since that first Big Give, but they've yet to start giving regularly. And there are others of us who, if we're honest, have gotten comfortable with an amount, but we've not taken our next steps toward maybe a tithe or even beyond the tithe. And so I'm doing with the church what I encourage givers to do. Live beneath your means so that you have margin to be generous. That's what we're doing as a church. We're living on 51 weeks of offering instead of 52. And I encourage people, hey, you can't outgive God and He will take care of you. Trust Him. And so the leadership of the church is trusting God with the church's money. In a sense, we're tithing on the tithe and trusting that He will meet our needs. And I'm super excited about how this money will be used. 3 initiatives. Last week we highlighted our 3rd international church plant that we'll be doing in Nicaragua, helping children amongst the poorest of the poor. Next week we'll tell you about how each campus has chosen a mission in its own backyard. And this week I'm excited to let you know about the New Thing Network.
I'm convinced if we're going to accomplish the Jesus mission, we need church planners with a dream of planting churches that will mobilize every person for mission, and a church that is reproducing over and over and over again. We cannot keep doing the same things the same way and expect different outcomes. Isaiah 43 tells us, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I'm doing a new thing. New Thing is a catalyst for movements of reproducing churches. And we're looking to come alongside a particular type of church planter. We're looking for church planters whose dream is not just planting one church, but of planting a reproducing church. And we want to help you make that dream come true. It all starts with relationships. Every church planter is a part of a network of reproducing churches. We're constantly also developing resources with you in mind to give you the tools to help your church become a healthy, reproducing church. Now, these last two values are where God has shown us tremendous favor. Reproducing. Everything we do is focused on reproducing. Why? Because reproducing makes movement possible, and movement is how the Jesus mission gets accomplished. Reproducing churches and residents across the U.S. and around the world is what's helping us create movements of reproducing churches. There are several ways you can get involved. First, we want to begin a conversation with you about how you can plant a reproducing church. You do not want to do this on your own. Let us connect you with others who want to start reproducing churches. New Thing's a place where you can experience a culture of reproduction. Maybe you should do a leadership residency, or possibly you're planning a church. Together, let's start a movement. New Thing wants to help you start your church and the next one and the next one. God's dream is for everyone to find their way back to Him. I believe it'll take movements of reproducing churches to accomplish that mission. And New Thing's mission is just that, to be a catalyst for movements of reproducing churches. So what's your dream?
So, can I ask you to mark your calendar and join us on the weekend of November 4th and 5th as we seek to take a huge step in generosity, a huge step of faith as a church, and attempt to do more good than we've ever done.